Welcome to MMT Chats. This episode brought to you by ISCAR with new ideas for machining intelligently. Hey MMT followers, Christina Fuges with MoldMaking Technology for a quick MMT chat. Today we are talking about impressions and inspirations from a recent American Mold Builders Association conference about leadership and mentorship in the mold making community. And I'm going to say it's with a special focus on the next generation. I'm here with MoldMaking Technology's managing editor, Grace Nehls. Hello, Grace.
Hey.
And Grace is actually a next generation professional herself who works on the print production side for two of Gardner Business Media brands, including MoldMaking Technology. We won't talk about the other one because we only care about MoldMaking Technology. So I've asked her, since we just attended this event, I wanted her to share a quick rundown of her takeaways from this event, which happens to be her first American Mold Builders Association conference, including its Emerging Leaders pre-conference session. All right, Grace. So let's dig into this. Okay, so first, what is your overall impression of the American Mold Builders member community?
So the first word I can think of to describe the community is definitely welcoming. As you said, this was my first conference, so I didn't know what to expect. I actually saw a lot of familiar faces that I've seen from AmeriMold and PT Expo that just occurred in March. But it was on a different, I guess, level. It's a conference. It's a little different. It's been emphasized to me how much of a community mold makers are. Yep. But I really think that this conference emphasized that the most to me. The way that I was able to sit down with several of them and just sit at a table and just introduce myself, and even just like watch you guys dominate the stage. I'm just going to say mold makers are a very lively bunch. And I mean, it is just a bunch of mold makers, sitting down together, finding their pain points and that sort of thing. So I thought it was super cool.
So is it safe to say, because you mentioned PT Expo and AmeriMold, is the biggest difference that it's not as hectic, right? It's not a trade show with a giant exhibit hall. It's a conference. So you want to talk a little bit about how, is that right? Is that how you view both of those events?
So there were definite differences. I mean, trade shows are obviously a little bigger. This was a little more smaller and put together. But I would say compared to trade shows, whereas exhibitors and, these individuals are there to help others better improve help their customers improve their own operations. They were here themselves to better improve their own company, their own operations, their own people. And I think that was the big difference that I saw.
I love that. That's a good one. They're there for themselves versus the supply chain, their customers and their vendors. Perfect.
Yes.
All right, let's talk about this Emerging Leaders pre-con session, because I aged out, so I'm not even allowed to attend that. So it's thrilling that there's somebody on the MoldMaking Technology team that was able to be the eyes and ears within this group that is relatively new with the AMBA. So talk about that. What did you learn and what was it like and who was there?
So first of all, it was 3 hours long,
okay,
which I think for a lot of us, we were like, oh my gosh, this is going to be so long. We're so tired. It's the first day. We're already just going to be so tired at the end of this. But it was super interesting. It really held my attention. They did give us breaks, so that kind of helped. But I really liked that I felt like I could participate. I say this time and time again, it's hard for us, I think, sometimes to really put ourselves in their shoes in the shop, because we don't work in a shop necessarily. We learn from them, we learn their stories, and that's what we do. So I was a little nervous coming in, being like, I've never been in a mold shop. I'm just here to listen to you guys. But I felt like I was really able to break out of that and to talk to a lot of these people. My table was actually able to help this one individual who he had just been risen to a management position recently. So we were actually actively helping him try to figure out some conflict, which was the theme of the pre-con session, that he was actually experiencing at his own position.
Oh, wow.
So it was really interesting to actually do this in real time, and to actually speak to someone who's actually dealing with some of these issues. And we learned a lot of stuff with conflict. I mean, I think conflict is like a huge thing that everyone experiences. One of the biggest things that I learned was you can't blame the people, you have to blame the process. I mean, most of the time, I think, what was this statistic? He said 96% of the time we blame the people, and 4% of the time we blame the process. And a lot of times it should be swapped, just the complete opposite. So starting to maybe delegate, okay, where is the root of this problem? And then one of the other things was, you don't have to be in a position of leadership to be a leader. That was another huge thing that I learned. A lot of these people, these emerging leaders, they're not in a leadership position, or what we would consider a leadership position. They're not owners, or they may not all be managers, but each one of them can take a leadership position if they wish, on wherever they are, whether they are working on a machine or they are just on the floor. And I thought that was really cool.
I love that. I felt that same thing at the overall conference. It was a real theme on leadership and almost redefining what that actually means on a personal level, like within your family, within your household, within your community, and let alone within where you work, your workplace. So I agree with that. All right. So how about 3 key takeaways? Not so much, well, it could be 3 key takeaways of what you learned, but also were there any takeaways that you personally learned that you can bring back to Gardner and your role within our company?
I think I mentioned a couple just now, but I think another thing, we talk about conflict in the workplace, and not necessarily saying I see that in mine, or you might see it in yours, but I think you really have to identify and address sooner rather than later these things, because there can be dire consequences. Conflict isn't bad in small doses, right? A little bit of healthy competition here or there is not going to hurt anyone, and that actually might help you or me. But after a moment, after a certain point, you have to address it. You have to be able to step up to the plate and be like, okay, where is this starting? Where is this root problem? And how can we take from that?
Got it. So how many people do you think attended this Emerging Leaders PreCon session?
I would say close to 40. I think there were about 5 to a table.
Okay. And what was your sense of the various roles? Like who did these next generation represent within their shops?
So they were all over the place. Like I mentioned, there was a guy right beside me who had just been risen to a management position. They were operators. There were some other managers in there. And then there were actually several apprentices. One company did bring in, I think, like 4 or 5 of his own apprentices.
TK Molds,
super cool. Yep,
right?
TK Molds. That's right.
Yep.
And that was actually one of the fun facts that they shared. That was super cool. So it was all really all over the place. I don't recall if anyone there was like an owner. I don't think so.
Okay.
But a lot of people, in management positions or on the shop floor, or that sort of thing. I think there were some, doing like software related things. So it was a really diverse group.
I love that, because it's nice to show you too, being new to the mold making industry, that there is a next generation in very key roles within the community, right? It's not just the older generation seasoned guys working machines. There's a whole menu of people and positions representing that next generation of leadership. So I think that's really exciting for me to hear that through your eyes. Mm-hmm. Do you want to give a shout out? Were there any critical or important or key contacts that you made during that? Not even just emerging leaders, but the event as a whole.
Yeah, there were so many people. Some of the people that stood out to me the most, or I found myself gravitating towards a lot, was Aaron Mansor and John Hamming from Model Tool and Die. I think I saw them a lot. I think they were one of the 2 of my first friends that I made at AMBA. They were just a blast to hang around. They were so nice. They kind of let me tag along here and there if I didn't know where to go. And they were super cool. Jimmy Ronaldo from Creative Technologies. I'm sure a lot of people know him. I just want to give him a shout out because we literally spent 30 minutes way before the show, or way before the conference, just chatting about next gen topics. Like we hadn't even started the conference, and we were just
that's great.
We were going full swing into it. We were like, what do we look at? What do we think is going to happen, or what do you think they're going to talk about? And he was super, super competent in the topic, and it was really cool to talk to him. And then also, Kyle Scott from Liberty Mold. who persuaded me to get up on that stage for the AMBA's Got Talent for
Yay!
some karaoke. He was a big supporter that night.
That's awesome.
Those are just a few people, but there were a lot of people I met and got to know a little better. And I want to thank all of you guys if you're watching this, because you really made my time there like really fun.
That's wonderful. And I told them to be really nice to you because I wanted to suck you into the community. And I think they did a great job.
I think they worked.
All right. My last question for you is the whole theme of the conference overall was shift your view. So give me something like how did it shift your view on anything?
So I like to say that my view is maybe shifted a little differently from a lot of other people's there. So let me break it down. So shifting your view, there was a lot of talk about generations, different generations, how each one is affected by the one preceding it, how the current one thinks. And this was all in the sphere of thinking about hiring and, keeping the workforce you currently have and that sort of thing. So whereas I felt that a lot of the discussion was talking about the younger generation, so, Generation Z and millennials and that sort of thing, being one of those people, my perspective, I was almost thinking about the opposite way. So I was kind of going backwards because a lot of the individuals there were, I think they like when they raised their hands, there were a lot of Gen Xers around there. So it was interesting for me as I guess I'm a millennial, to like look back and be like, okay, this is how they work.
Yeah.
So, that kind of made me think, okay, what are their motivations? What are their pain points? They're trying to think what my generation's pain points are, but what are theirs? Because they are still in this industry. They are still very real in this industry. And so, how can this younger generation understand their expectations and how can we compromise to suit both their parties, themselves and ourselves? Because it's a give and take. Like they can do so much to help those who are coming in, but we also have to be respectful of like how they work and how they think too.
Yeah, I 100% it's a two-way street. That was the one thing I think I knew it in my heart. The whole don't judge a book by its cover and knowing that don't always believe the labels or the stereotypes, but some of those presenters just presented it in a way where it just like a light bulb went off. Like, get to know them before it sounds like common sense, but we too naturally go through our days making judgments constantly just to get things done. So just to pull back and stop and say, I don't care how old you are or even where you came from. Let's talk about what the problem is or what's the project we want to work on. And let's work on it together. Right. Yep. And let's make a difference.
It's easy to categorize people. That's how we work as human beings. That's how we can hold so much information in mind. We categorize things into little boxes. And I think growing up, we always are asked like, what generation are you? Or we found out what generation are you? And there's such a big emphasis on that. And I think it's so hard to get out of that mindset.
It is.
But it practice, like everything else, it comes with practice and you just have to be willing to start that.
Thank you, Grace, for all those impressions and your inspirations. Anybody interested in the American Mold Builders Association, visit amba.org. And again, for everything mold making related, visit moldmakingtechnology.com. Stay informed and stay inspired.